It's another gorgeous day and another day of Joseph Did You Know? And with me today is the on time, on target man of the hour, Steve. How are you today?
Great, Danny. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited. So a couple weeks ago, I don't know, time is irrelevant to me. It doesn't exist in my world. So sometime in the past, I was on time, on target, and I had such a great time when I met you, and I was like, people need to know who you are. You are an inspiration. You've got so much going on. You spent time in the military, so you are a veteran. Tell me, first of all, before I start like just digging in and ask you all of these questions that I want to know about you, tell the world a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Thanks again for having me on, Danny. It was a pleasure interviewing you, and glad I could return the favor here just not too long afterwards. Steve Ankerstar, my dad was in the Air Force. I kind of got drafted in the Air Force because he was in the Air Force. But I saw Top Gun in high school, and I walked out of there and I said, you know what? I think I want to be a fighter pilot. And there was some laughter, and there were some people encouraging me to have a backup plan. But I stuck to my dream and made it happen through an Air Force scholarship, and then off to flight school early on in my career. Got to fly some cool airplanes. You can see some airplanes above me there, so I'm still hanging on to that dream, even though I don't fly anymore. And after I finished up with the Air Force, 20 years, went into financial management of investment assets for folks, and then just started a podcast to teach everybody. So it's really fun. I'm really blessed to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, it's a service heart. You can't just stop serving for 20 years at the capacity that you did, and then just be like, I feel like it's in you.
Right.
You got to keep going with it, and that is that. Maybe I'm making this up or putting words in your mouth, but is that how
you're right.
started?
You're right, and I have, it's kind of hard to see, but I do have a flight suit on still, and the reason I bought the flight suit was not really for the podcast. I bought it 6 years ago, was I speak a lot. So I view it as my way of giving back, and I know, Danny, you do so much to give back as well. My way of giving back was to speak to whoever wanted to hear me on flying airplanes. So I talk to schools, talk about how to be good, productive members of society. So I'm kind of in demand at the local area, if you will, for speaking, and that's my way of sharing my experiences with the taxpayers who funded all my flying for so many years, and try to put into words some of the things I've gotten to do that most people would love to sit and hear about.
So I didn't know you did that, so I have a question about that. Is it more, are you speaking on motivation and using skills, or are you saying join the military, the Air Force? Or is it kind of a combination?
Not really. I wouldn't call myself a recruiter. I'm more of a realist, if you will, and I've heard you use some real terms describing your experiences. So I will tell kids when I'm speaking, the military service is not for everybody. I do think service is for everybody. If you want to be a good, productive member of society, you should not be just serving yourself. You should be out there, adding value as well. But I go, if you're up for the military, it's a great way to go. And then I tell my story after that. So I'm not trying to talk anybody into it, but there's certain folks out there I can tell when somebody's in 8th grade, it's just like, yeah, they're wanting to be in the military and they're going to do great.
Yeah. I think that's about the age where my son was. Yep, he went from wanting to be a missionary to wanting to be in the military. It was right around that time. People were like, what? That's sounds like two totally separate ways to go about it. But in his mind, it was all the same. It was just a different action of doing it. Oh, now this might be an ignorant question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is there a difference between a stealth fighter pilot and another kind of fighter pilot?
There is. So when you think of all the fighter pilots that are out there, which are Navy, Air Force, Marines, all the branches of service, the Air Force has the most of them because we're the Air Force. But there's pilots that get to go to pilot training, and then a subset of that get to go on to be fighter pilots. And then a subset of that, after you have 500 hours in our experienced fighter pilot, that's when you can apply to become a stealth fighter pilot. So there's a number on my name tag. Let's see, Bandit 602. Probably might be able to see over here. Yeah, no, looking at the wrong area. But there's a number on there. If I can get it right. So I'm the 602nd person to ever fly the stealth fighter, and we ended up with only 800 or so that have ever flown it. So in terms of exclusivity, there's more people on NFL active rosters every year than there are that ever flew that stealth fighter. So that's why I kind of say the stealth fighter is what I go and talk to folks about, just because it was such a unique program to be a part of.
Yeah, does everybody want, is that their goal, or no?
Not necessarily. The flying the stealth is unique in that you sneak in and sneak out, which is not really the warrior way. In the first airplane I flew, the F-15, you would show up, you would beat your chest, you would announce that you're there, and you would hope that everybody would run away. And, as much as people in the military are warriors, it's always kind of nice if you show up and the enemy runs away.
Yeah.
That's a little better than having to shoot it out, right, for most people. So you'd announce your presence, and the enemy would go away and say, "You win. We'll go hide." But in a stealth fighter, obviously you're sneaking in, and that's why it's used for the first few nights of each conflict we have. You basically sneak in and you hit the high-value targets that are behind the enemy lines. So literally, you go in alone and unafraid with maybe a few other F-117s with you, and you sneak in, and the enemy doesn't know you're there until things start blowing up. And then when things start blowing up, you're already on the way back out. So the gig is up as far as you sneaking in, but you're getting out of there at 600 miles an hour. So you're out of there pretty quick.
I had no idea about this. So, hey, not a dumb question, because I just learned a lot. Okay, I feel better about that.
But not everybody does want to do it. A lot of folks stay with the airplane that they start with. It's kind of like the first child, you say. You love your firstborn, and they stick with that their whole careers. I bounced around from the Eagle to the F-117 stealth fighter, and then back to the Eagle. That's not that common to do that.
Okay.
So.
There must have been places that, besides being from an Air Force family, besides Top Gun, being that generation, can you look back at your life and be like, yeah, I can see this was the path that I was going to take, that I was going to end up doing this?
Well, there's plenty of hurdles along the way, and there's plenty of reasons to give up on your dream, and I was faced with the same challenges. So while you hear today and you always hear this is the good news story, well, here the real scoop behind the scenes is when I went to college, I couldn't get a pilot slot. So I competed with others. I was not good enough, smart enough, whatever they were looking for. You had to have 20/20 vision at the time. So it's like I couldn't get a pilot slot, so I went on to active duty and I became a missile maintenance officer, which is a small career field up, nuclear missiles up in South Dakota. Most people don't even, forget that those exist, right? But I kept chasing that dream, and I kept telling my bosses I want to go to pilot training, and they said, "You don't want to do that." And I said, "Actually, I do want to do that." And I made it in just before I was too old. I think it's 26 and a half is when you get too old, and that's when I made it in the door. So from seeing Top Gun to actually getting to the fighter was about a decade. And a lot of people give up before you listen to no's for a decade. A lot of people will find a new dream, but I made it happen, and wouldn't change a thing.
What was that? What made you be like, I'm going, even if I'm just making it? I love how you age out at 26. It's like athletes. They age out
right.
At 21. You're done.
Yeah, and I left the Air Force, and you're basically at 40, your fighter pilot days are over because you're too old. You've lost a step at that point. You're not as, your hand-eye coordination isn't quite as impeccable as it was back in the day. But what I tell folks is, and I think it's, kind of going right brain here a little bit, but one thing I've always been able to do is picture myself in the role. And I think that's when I talk to folks about goal setting and achievement, I think that's the biggest struggle. It's like, can you really see yourself there doing that job? Whether it's, kids want to be professional athletes. It's like, okay, can you see that? Can you see yourself on TV on Sunday playing football? And if they can see that, that is a game changer, because that way they believe. They're just like, okay, well, now what do I have to do to get there? But if they're doubting that they actually could ever do it, then it's like, well, then they're not going to do all the little things along the way, the 10,000 hurdles between you and your goal, that's going to mean you're going to give up. The analogy I use for most that some people can relate to is running marathons. If you've ever done one, it's the dumbest thing in the world to wake up and run 26.2 miles in one day. But there's a million reasons to quit along the way. Right. And a lot of people do. There's only one reason to keep going. That's because you said you were going to do it and you trained for it, so do it. So it's being able to visualize things, I think, is the key.
So that was just embedded in you. It's funny that you use that because my brother, when he's training athletes, there's like 7 steps, and one of them is visualization. Just even down to the basic skill that you need. If you cannot see yourself doing that skill, then it's not going to happen.
Right. There's no magic. Your comprehension. Certainly not going to happen in some magic way, right?
Yeah. No. So what did you take? You had 20 years. Did you spend the whole time as a stealth fighter pilot?
Nope. I started. That's okay. Yeah.
You didn't start that way, but once you got there.
Right. So I got to pilot training where I went to lovely Del Rio, Texas. It's on the border. Not many people have been there. It's a little out of the way. We tend to put flying bases in like remote areas, so in case airplanes do crash, which if you fly them long enough they will, nobody's hurt, that sort of thing. So it's been a year at pilot training and then about another year becoming a fighter pilot after that. From then I spent about a total of my 10 years in the Air Force as an operational fighter pilot. Most of that was flying F-15s, and then I spent 3 years flying the F-117. The rest of the jobs were commanding, staff jobs, flying some trainers along the way. But being a frontline warfighter, basically about half of my career. And that's about right. Some guys get a little bit more, some get less, but I'm very privileged to have the 10 years that I did.
Yeah. And so you walk out, can you talk about that transition of going from, that career in the military into what you're doing? Was it seamless for you? Did you know what you wanted to do coming out?
I did. I had a very clear vision, again, and I think that's very helpful for folks that are out there trying to, achieve a goal, even if they're like, hey, this is a really lofty goal. Well, it's like, you have to have a clear vision of it. I was in the Middle East in a little country called Qatar, which is the thumb that kind of sticks out in the Persian Gulf, and I was working in the Air Operations Center, and you work basically 12 hours a day, and then you were off for 12 hours. And during that time, I was over there for a year, which was tough to be away from the family. That's when I decided for sure that I was going to open up my own financial services firm, get into financial planning and investment management. And I did all my qualifications while I was deployed from the Middle East. I came back over to the States. I took the Certified Financial Planner exam with really nothing but book study. You're supposed to have 3 years of experience in the industry before you even take it. I took it. So I passed the test before I had any experience, and then I would tell clients, they would ask, they're like, "Bart, Steve, are you a CFP?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not, but I did take the test and pass it, but I just got 3 years of time going by before I can call myself a certified financial planner." But I saw myself as a success, and there's all kinds of numbers as far as small businesses failing. I've never looked at it that way. If somebody tells me 80% of small businesses fail, I immediately think, well, 20% of them don't. So, and I've kind of always been in the top 20%. So that's why I tell athletes, I'm like, if you're a star athlete, don't be afraid that just a few make it, because you're part of the few already. So, just go for it. And if you don't make it, you'll find something else to do. But I went into my own business for myself and always wanted to be my own boss. And absolutely love it. And plus I'm home with my family, and I was gone a lot in the military. I like that from the military perspective, but I didn't like it from the strength of relationship with my wife and the connection I have with my kids. I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah, it takes, when you are away, it takes twice as much, maybe 3 times as much effort to keep that connection and that vision of why you're together going strong.
Right.
You get complacent and just get in your day-to-day life of deployment or work, whatever it is, and forget that, that needs fostering. If you don't water it, it will not grow.
It's like anything else. It needs to be on your daily to-do list, right? Pay attention to it.
So how did you keep that going? What did you visualize? Just an awesome marriage, and then there you go. You move towards what you visualize? Same concept?
Well, not necessarily. I was, everybody's different, but I say that I'm a little bit older in the fact I got married at 34. Obviously, some are after that, but I kind of thought that was later, at least than most of my peers had been married by that time. Yeah. So kind of one of the last few single holdouts. And as far as marriage, I had to meet the right person, and I had to be ready myself. I think, and honestly, my wife's heard me say this, I've met a few right people along the way, but I wasn't ready until I turned 30. Even with my wife, I told her, you know, it's like, I want to get married and spend the rest of my life with you, but the airplane, while I'm actively flying, that's the airplane's number one. You will not be number one until I stop flying an airplane, because if I do mess up at work, I could pass away. So that's kind of the military first mindset. And we had that conversation, and she was like, "Nope, I totally get it." And I said, "Now after I retire, then I plan to work from home," which I do. This is my home studio, even before COVID-19 forced everybody home. And I think it's the best setup in the world. I really do, for strength of relationship and everything that's involved. So I think, just like you said earlier, you have to nurture a relationship of any sort, whether it's marriage or with your kids. So being around and being able to do that on a daily basis has made it just so much stronger. I love it.
I think you're very smart being upfront and not trying to sugarcoat it or lie to her in the very beginning about, this is my number one priority, right? Because no woman wants to hear like, "Oh, that's awesome, Steve. I'm so stoked to be
right.
second to a plane." But when you, not the loving words, but when you explain it in your upfront, but you have this plan, you have this vision, and there is a direct purpose of, staying alive and staying, true to who you are and who the relationship, there is benefit into that. So everybody out there listening, if you think they're going to run, they won't if they're the right person. It has to be perfect timing, perfect place for things. How did you not get kind of persuade to say yes and do it faster? Because that is that is the thing. People getting married earlier in the military, your life moves much faster in the military. So how did you stay true to yourself during that?
It's true story, and it's all. I mean, what you're saying is so true from a military perspective. Is that you're kind of you're trained a lot, and it's great training no matter what service you're in. But you're kind of checklist based. Like, okay, go get this schooling, go get this training, pick up a spouse, have children. It's all kind of checklist based, right? So yeah. I think a lot of folks kind of go with the flow, if you will, and end up married pretty early in the military. And it does help to have a spouse back home when you're on the other side of the world taking care of everything for you. So there's some convenience out of it too. But with me, it was whether I was ready or not. I would not, I matured very quickly as far as goal setting. And being able to have crystal clear vision and speaking at the front of the room, some things that I found naturally. But I really wanted to, when people say, "What's your best financial advice to give anybody?" and I say, get married exactly once. So you want to spend life with somebody from a financial perspective because it's so efficient, right? But then if you trade, if then you end up in divorce and things happen, of course. But if you can manage it, you get married exactly once. You've optimized your finances for life, and I came from a background of strong families. I'm just very fortunate, and folks that are kind of trained me that marriage is one time and you make it work from there. And it won't always be fun and rainbows and unicorns, right? It's work too, and but yeah, I needed to be ready. So it's kind of more being honest with myself. So
I love that. Not a lot of people are. I mean, I sure as heck wasn't. I was checking off boxes left and right. Boxes that didn't even belong to me were being checked off when I went through my life. It was a little later in that blossoming of that. But it's smart. It's actually just a smart philosophy. If you want to do something like once, like a major thing one time, way better. That is, right. I like that concept. I have to be able to sit on that a little bit so I can verbalize it better, but I love that concept that you had. So before I let you go, because time flies, especially when I'm being nosy as anything about your life and how you think, which is, what I do best. Giving everybody a little perspective of the inside of who Steve is so that they will tune in and listen to On Time, On Target, because you do the same thing but on the other side of it. Right now, Steve, in this moment, the first thing that comes to your mind and your heart, what does love mean to you?
Well, I think love is complete dedication. So kind of like we talked about before, it's not always, sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes it's downright work. Sometimes it's a lot of looking in the mirror at yourself and saying, okay, I'm wrong here, or I need to compromise. But love is dedication. So, once you commit and say your vows, our society has made it kind of easy to walk those back and leave. But if you are dedicated to it and the person that you're married to has the same level of feeling, then really it's we're fortunate we don't argue a lot, but because we don't let ourselves argue, right? There's big deals, that things we don't agree on, but we walk away, figure it out, and then come back and figure it out as a team. And same thing with children. I have two, and there's days that are amazing, and there's other days that are like, I have no idea who this is. I've never seen you before. Where's this coming from? And it's the same thing. You can get mad, you walk away, you sort it out, and then you come back and love them even harder going forward from there.
It's that mission statement. When we have a mission statement for ourselves and as a couple, it's quite easy when you don't agree and or you have different perspectives to things, to come back once you cool down. As long as it aligns with that mission that you have committed for each other, it doesn't really matter if you agree or not. We're not going to agree all the time. We're not going to always see eye to eye. It would be a very boring world if we
right.
If that was the case. But we don't need craziness, right? We need...
Leave the crazy behind.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you so much. And tell everybody where they can find you, how they can listen to your podcast, get your great advice, because you do give free advice out there just about the financial world and life in general in that realm. So where can people find you?
Well, thank you for the platform to allow me to talk about the podcast a little bit. So the podcast, I've thought about it from when I was just retiring and standing up my business, but I needed to kind of focus on the business and get it up and mature, if you will, so I'm making enough money to where I can take an undertaking like the podcast. So as Dani knows, we take to the air and try to provide quality content, value added for folks, and very little, or if anything, in return other than the satisfaction of having done it. But my podcast it's a little bit personal finance. We get to numbers, most of the time, but it's a lot about goal setting and goal achieving. And I like to say the tagline of it is making your dreams reality. And I do talk a lot about my experiences, not only financially, but investing early and often, and that part of it, but also being able to have clear vision of what you want to do in life. So I really do. Obviously, it's my content, so I think it's worth listening to. But I really do think it benefits a wide variety of audiences, because I'm not just throwing numbers at you or how to invest in this or that or the other, which bores a lot of people. I'm trying to give you a little insight onto success, goal setting, and goal achievement. And I think everybody needs a little boost from a different voice every now and then. I have about 8 podcasts that I follow, and I kind of bounce around depending on what kind of mood I'm in. For people that are they're going to drone on about their experiences, and I get a lot out of that. So it's called On Time, On Target. You can search that, or just my last name, Ankerstar. Both of those will hit, and you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. So check it out, please.
Thank you. You are doing good work, and I have to give a couple little shout-outs here. Russell, my main man in Spokane, Washington. He's still looking for love. Russell, you will find it. You're a great guy. And Brian gave a great comment. Attitude. It'll make you or break you. I'm a true believer in that. Keep it up, Steve. That is for sure, Brian. And Sherry, thank you for your service. Travis, Michelle. So a lot of people, sorry, I was so into Steve, I didn't say hey to you guys earlier. I apologize for that. But until next time, everybody, love hard, love proactive, and love true. And we will see you tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.